The man history would know as Augustus, the first and greatest of Rome's emperors, was born Gaius Octavius Thurenus on the 23rd of September, 63 BC. In the city of Rome, his birth occurred amidst the final political collapse of the Republic, a time of escalating civil strife and violence. Born into a wealthy and respectable, though not yet paramount, equestrian family from the Valsian town of Daldau. Valtre, his father also named Gaius Octavius, was a novus homo, the first in his line to enter the Senate, having attained the praetorship and the governorship of Macedonia. His mother, Atia Balbocaisonia, was of far more significant stock. Being the niece of the rising political and military prodigy, Gaius Julius Caesar, the elder Octavius died suddenly in 59 BC when the boy was just 4 years old, and his upbringing fell largely to his mother and his formidable grandmother, Julia, the sister of Julius Caesar himself. It was from his mother, a woman of strict virtue and traditional values, that he is said to have inherited a natural caution and a profound sense of piety. He would later write of his childhood as being one of modest refinement. His family's home in Velatre, a simple dwelling without the marble and grandeur that would later define his rule. The young Octavius was a serious and somewhat sickly child, possessed of a keen intellect, but a constitution that often caused concern. His early education was that of any young aristocrat, focusing on rhetoric, literature, and Greek philosophy, preparing him for a public career. His great-uncle Julius Caesar, increasingly dominant in Roman politics, took a growing interest in the boy, seeing in him a potential heir. In 48 BC, at the age of 15, Octavius was elected to the priestly college of the Pontifices, a clear sign of Caesar's patronage. Despite his youth and recurring illnesses, he demonstrated a preternatural maturity and ambition. When Caesar prepared for his African campaign against the remnants of the Pompeian faction, the young Octavius sought to join him, but was deemed too young. Undeterred, he followed later, surviving a shipwreck on the journey, an event that showcased a resilience that would become his trademark. Caesar, impressed, allowed him to join the campaign and included him in his triumphal celebrations in 46 BC. The course of his life was irrevocably altered on the Ides of March, 44 BC, while undergoing military training in Apollonia, Illyricum, in preparation for Caesar's planned Parthian War. The news arrived of his great-uncle's assassination. Along with the news came the revelation that Caesar had posthumously adopted him in his will, naming him his principal heir and bequeathing him 3/4 of his vast estate, as well as the potent Caesar name. He was now Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. Too many, including the consul Mark Antony, who saw himself as Caesar's natural political successor. This sickly 18-year-old was an irrelevance, a boy undeserving of such a legacy, was a profound miscalculation. Displaying the audacity that would define his early career, Octavian, as he's now known to history, rejected the advice of his family and friends to decline the dangerous inheritance. He traveled to Rome, declaring his intention to claim his name and his legacy, a move that placed him in direct opposition to the powerful and experienced Mark Antony. What followed was a masterclass in political maneuvering. Lacking an army or a significant political base, Octavian used his borrowed funds and the potent magic of Caesar's name to raise a private army from his adoptive father's veterans in Campania. He positioned himself as the rightful avenger of Caesar, a champion of the Senate's authority against the overreach of Antony. In a cynical but brilliant alliance, the Senate, under the guidance of Cicero, who famously praised the young man to be praised, raised, and eliminated, granted Octavian imperium and sent him with the consuls to defeat Antony at the Battle of Mutina in 43 BC. The consuls died in the fighting, and Octavian, now in command of their legions, demanded the consulship for himself. The Senate, believing the threat from Antony was over, refused. In response, the 19-year-old marched his 8 legions on Rome and occupied the city, compelling a terrified Senate to elect him consul. He had learned his first brutal lesson: the Senate was an instrument to be used, not a master to be obeyed. The political landscape shifted once more with the resurgence of Mark Antony, who had allied with Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, the governor of Nearer Spain. Faced with this combined force and the growing power of Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius in the east, Octavian made a pragmatic and ruthless decision. He met with Antony and Lepidus near Bononia, and the three formed the Second Triumvirate. a legalized cartel of violence with the explicit goal of avenging Caesar and purging their enemies. Unlike the informal First Triumvirate, this was a legally sanctioned dictatorship, and its first act was the ghastly proscriptions, lists of political enemies whose lives and property were forfeit. Among the most famous victims was Cicero, whose Philippics against Antony earned him a place on the list, his death acquiesced to by Octavian as the price of the alliance. The triumvirs then turned east, and at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC, the armies of Brutus and Cassius were destroyed. It was said that before the battle, Octavian was warned in a dream by his divine father. And though he was ill during the fighting, the victory was complete. The Republic, for all intents and purposes, was dead. The aftermath of Philippi saw the triumvirate divide the Roman world. Octavian took the difficult west, including Italy, which was fraught with the problem of settling thousands of veterans on confiscated land. Antony took the wealthy east, and Lepidus was given Africa. It was in Italy that Octavian faced his next great challenge, the rebellion of Antony's brother and wife, and more significantly, a war against Sextus Pompey, son of Pompey the Great, who commanded a powerful fleet based in Sicily that was strangling the grain supply to Rome. These years were marked by initial failures and political fragility. Octavian's marriage to Scribonia, a relative of Sextus Pompey, was a brief political union that produced his only child, Julia. He soon divorced her, famously claiming he was weary of her bad temper, to marry Livia Drusilla, a union of profound personal and political importance that would last for the rest of his life. The war against Sextus Pompey was going poorly until Octavian placed his trust in his childhood friend and brilliant admiral Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. Agrippa's naval victories at Mylae and Naulochus in 36 BC shattered Sextus' power. In a simultaneous political masterstroke, Octavian used the attempted rebellion of Lepidus to strip him of his army and provinces, leaving only two men standing, himself and Antony. The final break with Antony was now inevitable. While Octavian presented himself as the champion of Italy and Roman tradition, Antony in the East increasingly adopted the style of a Hellenistic monarch. His association with the Egyptian queen Cleopatra VII providing potent propaganda for Octavian. The relationship was portrayed not as a political alliance, but as a surrender to Eastern decadence, a betrayal of Rome itself. In 32 BC, Antony formally divorced Octavian's sister Octavia, a public insult that Octavian exploited. He obtained Antony's will, which he illegally read before the Senate, claiming it confirmed Antony's intentions to bequeath Roman territories to Cleopatra and her children. The public outrage allowed Octavian to push through a declaration of war not against Antony, a Roman citizen, but against the foreign queen, Cleopatra. The conflict culminated at the naval Battle of Actium in 31 BC once again. It was Agrippa's genius that secured victory. As the battle turned, Cleopatra's fleet and then Antony's fled, and their forces disintegrated. A year later, with Octavian's armies advancing on Alexandria, both Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide. At the age of 32, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus was the sole master of the Roman world. The question now was what he would do with this unparalleled power. The lessons of the Ides of March were not lost on him. A return to the old republic was impossible, but an open monarchy was dangerous. In 27 BC, in a carefully staged performance before the Senate, he dramatically resigned all his extraordinary powers and declared the restoration of the Republic. The Senate, filled with his partisans, predictably refused and begged him to remain. In this charade of consent, a new constitutional settlement was forged. He accepted a grant of proconsular power, or imperium, over a vast province comprising Gaul, Spain, Syria, and Egypt, the key military zones of the empire. This gave him command of the vast majority of the legions. In Rome itself, he was granted the name Augustus, a term with profound religious connotations of reverence and sanctity, rather than a blatantly political title like Rex or dictator. He was princeps, the first citizen, not an autocrat. This first settlement was the foundation of the Principate, a system of government that would last for centuries. Over the next 4 decades, Augustus refined this system, consolidating his power while maintaining the facade of republican tradition. He served multiple consulships and was granted tribunician power for life. giving him inviolability and control over the assemblies and the Senate, became the Pontifex Maximus, head of the state religion. He cultivated an image of a traditional Roman paterfamilias, living in a modest house on the Palatine Hill, promoting laws to restore moral virtue and encourage marriage and childbirth. His wife Livia was the model of the virtuous Roman matron. This public image of piety, simplicity, and duty stood in stark contrast to the perceived decadence of the late Republic and the Hellenistic East. The reality of his rule, however, was absolute. He maintained a tight control over the military, funding it through his personal wealth from the Egyptian treasury and ensuring the loyalty of every soldier through personal oaths and donatives. He restructured the administration of the empire, creating new offices filled by loyal men of equestrian rank, bypassing the old aristocratic families when necessary. He initiated a vast building program, famously boasting that he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Temples, forums, and theaters were constructed, all serving as propaganda for the new Golden Age, the Pax Augusta. This peace, however, was not passive. Under his rule, the empire expanded its frontiers, finalizing the conquest of Spain, subjugating the Alpine regions, pushing into Germania and the Danube lands. This expansion was not without its setbacks, most famously the annihilation of 3 legions under Publius Quinctilius Varus in the Teutoburg Forest in 09 AD, a loss that halted Roman ambitions in Germania and was said to have left Augustus crying, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions." The greatest challenge of his later years was the problem of succession. Despite multiple marriages within his family, he was plagued by a series of untimely deaths. His beloved nephew and son-in-law Marcellus died young. His trusted generals and intended heirs, Agrippa, and his own grandsons Gaius and Lucius Caesar, all predeceased him. These personal tragedies were intertwined with political scandals, including the exile of his own daughter, Julia, for alleged adultery and treason. A stark reminder that the dynastic plans of the princeps were not immune to the passions and failures of his family. Ultimately, he was forced to turn to his stepson, Tiberius, the son of Livia, a capable but dour and reluctant heir. In 14 AD, as he traveled to his late father's home in Nola, Augustus fell ill. He summoned Tiberius for a final lengthy meeting, and on the 19th of August with his wife Livia by his side. He asked those present if he had played his part well in the comedy of life, adding the final line, "Since well I've played my part, all clap your hands, and from the stage dismiss me with applause." He then died peacefully at the age of 75. His body was carried back to Rome and given a magnificent funeral. His ashes were interred in his immense mausoleum in the Campus Martis. Upon the motion of a senator, his name was added to the hymns of the Salian priests, and the month of Sextilis was renamed August in his honor. More significantly, the Senate officially deified him, making Divus Augustus a god of the Roman state. What do you think of Augustus? Was he a visionary statesman who saved Rome from collapse, creating a system of stable government that brought 2 centuries of prosperity? Or was he a calculating and ruthless autocrat who, while ending the civil wars, destroyed the liberties of the Republic behind a carefully constructed facade? Please let us know in the comment section, and in the meantime, thank you very much for watching.